Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for Renaissance Periodization Weekly tip number 16. Yep, I'm still counting them. Maybe in hundreds of years, I'll be in tip number, whatever hundreds is, multiplied by 52. In any case, knees over toes on quadricep moves like squats and hack squats and leg presses and lunges, especially squats. Is it okay or is it a concern? Should you not do it? Now, here's the thing, especially if you have lived in the pre-knees over toes guy on YouTube era, which say anytime before like this year, you've probably instilled, probably heard a ton, especially from old timers at the gym, don't push your knees over your toes. You know, when you get your first personal trainer's license, I think it says that right on the certificate, and it's bad and your knees, you know, they get Ebola or whatever, and you're going to die. And that's supposed to be a bad thing. And it turns out that's not actually very valuable advice for quad training, okay? However, well, here's why. There's something inherently injurious to the knees when you push your knees over your toes. This is not a thing. It does feel strange to do, mostly because pushing your knees over your toes by ankle mobility constraints requires you to get onto your toes and thus off of your heels. When you get off of your heels, there's a huge increase in the degree of instability at, well, every joint north of the balls of your feet, and particularly at the knee. So it feels weird and wobbly. And then pushing your knees first kind of has this like mild shearing effect. You get used to doing it after like 3 sessions, but if you always practiced squatting sitting real far back, doing that knees over toes thing, especially if your heels lift, feels strange. You can't produce a ton of force. You're like, this is all wrong. So the grain of truth with don't let your knees go over your toes is that, yeah, it makes the lift feel weird if you're not used to it. And it also makes it unstable in this that actually prevents your quads from producing a ton of force, especially if you're not very well practiced at it. Which is why sissy squats, for example, which is only squatting off of your actual toes, are like a fine assistance exercise for some lifts, and they're a decent hypertrophy move like when you're tired at the end of a workout. But as a primary quad builder, they're usually not that great because your quads refuse to produce a crap load of tension, mediated mostly, well, actually at the spinal cord and at the brain, because they detect a lot of instability. Not the quads themselves, but in general, your whole body detects instability. So what ends up happening is, yeah, knees over toes itself isn't directly bad. It's not going to hurt your knees. It does feel weird. But there is a grain of truth that it might not be something that you sort of catch into quickly, and it might feel off, and it might not produce a ton of force, and it might actually not get you great results because of the fact, almost exclusively, that you are on your toes and not on your heels, or rather your whole foot. So should you worry about your knees crossing your toes? The answer is no. You should be concerned, not worried. Oh, what's going on here? Like anytime I hear worry, I just automatically, my Jewish worry side turns on. And of course, with that comes the voice. So anytime you let your knees pass over your toes, what you want to make sure to do in most cases is have your whole foot on the ground or on the hack squat platform or whatever it is, so that you can push through your heels, through your midfoot, and through your toes. And then if your knees come over your toes, you're going to still be able to generate a ton of quad tension, stretch the quad a bunch, produce a ton of hypertrophy, and everything is super, super awesome. So yes, it's okay for your knees to go over your toes in any case, whether or not your toes are only on the ground or if your whole foot is on the ground, but it's probably more productive in most cases to just make sure your whole foot is on the platform or on the ground, and then having your toes go over your knees is totally fine. It's going to feel weird if you're not used to it. If you come from a powerlifting background or you've just been taught to sit back, ease into it slowly, keep sitting back a little bit, and then sit a little more forward, and after a while, you get the hang of it. In addition, you might have to switch where you put your feet. You might have to turn your feet out because, look, calf mobility is actually one of the huge limiting factors in your ability to squat, hack squat, leg press with proper back position and everything like that, because it's one of the biggest limiting factors. You may also consider getting squat shoes. In my view, if you claim to be an intelligent and serious pursuer of quad hypertrophy and you don't have a pair of weightlifting shoes, you better have the best damn ankle mobility I've ever seen in my life. If you don't, get weightlifting shoes. What brand, Dr. Mike? What's that demon in my head? Any brand is fine. Doughwins from China are like $1 or some shit. I don't know. They're like 50. They work great. It's a fucking shoe. Just make sure it's solid and the heel feels like it's not going to bust open when you sit on it. It's good. I wear, for those of you asking, the Adidas Ironwork 2, or I think it was discontinued in like 2008 or whatever. My shoes are like older than me or some shit. So if you get weightlifting shoes, it's going to make a huge difference on your quad training. And here's the thing, weightlifting shoes, your knees go way over your toes. No problem at all. Weightlifters do it all the time. They have super healthy knees in most cases. It's not a problem. Just remember, ease into it. It's going to feel weird. Try to make sure most of your weight is spread over your toes, midfoot, and heels, and then you'll be good to go. And if you want to throw in a few sissy squats in every now and again, I think that's totally cool. I just wouldn't rely on that exercise as a huge compound quad builder because due to its inherent instability, you may not get the quadriceps to really fire off its biggest, fastest twitch motor units and thus get the best hypertrophy. Folks, I've been Dr. Mike as usual. See you next week for the next weekly tip.